What's up, guys? We are on the 17th shelf of my wrestling collection. We are on TLC here. This is the first TLC pay-per-view. I hated these gimmick type pay-per-views like this, but you got Christian versus Shelton Benjamin for the ECW belt. At least they were trying to push Shelton Benjamin again here. John Cena versus Sheamus in a tables match. You know, that's kind of a joke. Undertaker versus Batista, always good. And then you got Big Show and Chris Jericho versus Triple H and Shawn Michaels in a TLC match for the tag belts. This is when they were starting to not really put a whole lot on the back of these DVDs. Then, of course, we got the old reliable of every year, the Royal Rumble. Pretty decent card here. Sheamus and Randy Orton. That was pretty good. Undertaker and Rey Mysterio is not a matchup you see very often, which made that very interesting and wanting people to watch it. Michelle McCool and Mickie James, two women who could wrestle. Christian versus Ezekiel Jackson. Ezekiel Jackson was awful. Then there's The Miz versus MVP, solid match. And then, of course, you got the 30-man Royal Rumble match. You know, pretty good Royal Rumble right here. Then we have Elimination Chamber. Yep, you got Gail Kim versus Maryse. You know, Maryse couldn't really wrestle in the ring. She's great on the mic, though. Drew McIntyre versus Kane. They were trying to push Drew McIntyre as Vince McMahon's chosen one. The Miz versus MVP, again, solid match. Gail Kim and Maryse versus Michelle McCool and Layla was dumb. Yep, and then you've got the two Elimination Chamber matches. Both kind of got some people who probably shouldn't be in that match, but they were trying to push some younger talent. You got Undertaker, John Morrison, Chris Jericho, Rey Mysterio, R-Truth, and CM Punk for the World Heavyweight belt. And then you have Sheamus, John Cena, Kofi Kingston, Randy Orton, Triple H, and Ted DiBiase for the WWE belt. It's an okay Elimination Chamber. The previous two were way better as far as cards were concerned. Then we have WrestleMania 26. You know, I love anything from WrestleMania, I want to say 17 up to this point. I enjoyed every WrestleMania, including this one. The one after this, not so much. 10 Diva tag team match was, you know, they're just trying to get them all on the card to give them their WrestleMania payday. Mickie James, Kelly Kelly, Eve, Gail Kim, and Beth Phoenix versus Michelle McCool, Maryse, Layla, Alicia Fox, and Vicky Guerrero. You got the Money in the Bank match as they keep getting bigger too. It started with 6 and now they're like, what, up to 10? Kane, Christian, Kofi Kingston, MVP, Matt Hardy, Shelton Benjamin, Evan Bourne, Drew McIntyre, Jack Swagger, and Dolph Ziggler. Oh, boy. Unified Tag Team Championship match, The Miz and John Morrison. And it's Big Show and The Miz versus John Morrison and R-Truth. My bad. Rey Mysterio and CM Punk was an okay match. This is when CM Punk was doing his Straight Edge Society gimmick. I did like Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes versus Ted DiBiase. I thought that was a great match. Triple H versus Sheamus was okay. This was when Triple H was winding down his full-time in-ring career. Bret Hart versus Mr. McMahon was the match you wanted to see. It wasn't very good, though, sadly. I wish it would have happened back in the 90s, like when Stone Cold was doing stuff with McMahon as well. Undertaker versus Shawn Michaels, another classic. If I had to choose between the two of them, I would say that 25 was better. Chris Jericho and Edge, fantastic match. And Batista and John Cena, fantastic match. Then, of course, you got the Hall of Fame on there, which I always love watching as well. So, all in all, great WrestleMania. Then we've got Extreme Rules. JTG versus Shad in a strap match. Broke up Crime Time. No one cared. Michelle McCool and Beth Phoenix. Two women who could wrestle. I loved Beth Phoenix. I thought she was underutilized back then. Gauntlet match. Big Show and The Miz versus R-Truth and John Morrison. MVP Mark Henry and the Hart Dynasty. I don't remember a lot about that match. Edge versus Chris Jericho in a steel cage. You knew that was going to deliver. Triple H versus Sheamus in a street fight. This was Triple H's last pay-per-view as a full-time wrestler. Rey Mysterio and CM Punk. Again, okay match. Gets his head shaved if he loses. Jack Swagger versus Randy Orton. They were really trying to push Jack Swagger here. I liked Jack Swagger. So then you got John Cena and Batista again, and Batista was winding down his career also. This is kind of when the dark age of WWE started to come about, because you used to have all these main event stars, and within the course of 4 months, you lose 3 of them. You lose Triple H, Shawn Michaels, and Batista. So all of a sudden now you're scrambling to try to find people and just kind of randomly throwing people into those spots. Then we have Batista's last pay-per-view, Over the Limit. Eve versus Maurice, horrible. Another Rey Mysterio CM Punk average match. R-Truth versus Ted DiBiase was okay. They were trying to push Ted DiBiase as a mid-card guy on his own now. Drew McIntyre versus Kofi Kingston was a pretty solid match. Hart Dynasty versus Jericho and The Miz. Not so much. Randy Orton and Edge was a good match. Breaking up their tag team and feuding and all that stuff. Then you got Jack Swagger versus Big Show. Not good at all. And then the I Quit match for the WWE title. Loved the storyline for this, for that match. Very well done. Then, yeah, pretty solid pay-per-view. Then we have Fatal 4-Way. Again, they're doing these gimmick pay-per-views now, which is kind of stupid. Hart Dynasty versus the Usos. The Miz versus R-Truth was okay. Chris Jericho versus Evan Bourne was actually really good. Jericho is not afraid to work with younger talent. Eve versus Gail Kim versus Maurice versus Alicia Fox. 2 of the 4 could wrestle. Kofi Kingston and Drew McIntyre was a solid match. Then you had Jack Swagger versus Big Show versus CM Punk versus Rey Mysterio for the World Heavyweight belt, which was eh. Then you had John Cena, Edge, Randy Orton, and Sheamus for the WWE belt. And that was actually a very entertaining match. They made Sheamus look like really, really good in that match. Then we have the first Money in the Bank pay-per-view match, or pay-per-view, I should say, where this is where they started to take it off of WrestleMania. But you got Layla versus Kelly Kelly, not very good. Alicia Fox versus Eve, not very good. The Hart Dynasty versus the Usos was a very solid tag team match. SmackDown Money in the Bank match, just so many people, it's ridiculous. Big Show, Kane, Kofi Kingston, Christian, Matt Hardy, Drew McIntyre, Dolph Ziggler, and Dashing Cody Rhodes. I love Money in the Bank matches, but sometimes there's just too many people. Then you got, for the Raw one, you got Randy Orton, John Morrison, Evan Bourne, Mark Henry, Edge, Chris Jericho, The Miz, and Ted DiBiase. Again, too many people. Rey Mysterio versus Jack Swagger for the world title. Pretty good match. And then Sheamus versus John Cena in a steel cage was a solid match as well. So all in all, a pretty good outing for its first Money in the Bank pay-per-view. And we are in the PG era now, by the way, which is another reason why it's the dark days of WWE. But we got SummerSlam 2010. You got Big Show versus the Straight Edge Society. Horrible. Alicia Fox and Melina was not very good. Kane versus Rey Mysterio was interesting. Again, another matchup you're not used to seeing. This is when they were pushing Kane for a couple months as the champion. Dolph Ziggler and Kofi Kingston was a solid match. Sheamus and Randy Orton was actually a really good match. Then you got the WWE versus Nexus. You know, again, too many people. You know, I love Bret Hart, but having him be in the match kind of made no sense. You know, like I said, they were just kind of throwing names against the wall here because of how many people they lost in the previous few months. Then you've got Night of Champions. Love these pay-per-views. All right, you got Melina versus Lay Cool in a unification match. They finally realized they don't have enough women who could actually wrestle at this point in time. Then you got the tag team turmoil for the tag team belts. The Hart Dynasty versus Mark Henry and Evan Bourne. See, again, just throwing people together. Santino Marella and Vladimir Kozlov, again, throwing people together. Drew McIntyre and Dashing Cody Rhodes, again. And then finally the Usos. And then you've got Dolph Ziggler versus Kofi Kingston for the Intercontinental belt, which was solid. Big Show versus CM Punk, which was not very good. The Miz versus Daniel Bryan for the U.S. belt. You know, interesting. Six-pack challenge for the WWE belt. Sheamus, John Cena, Randy Orton, Edge, Chris Jericho, and Wade Barrett. I love that they were pushing Wade Barrett. Big fan of Wade Barrett. I was kind of mad that they didn't use him properly after a while, after they broke up Nexus. Then you've got Kane versus The Undertaker, which was always interesting storyline-wise. All in all, pretty solid pay-per-view. Then we have Hell in a Cell. You got Edge versus Jack Swagger. Michelle McCool versus Natalya. That was a good match. Then you got Daniel Bryan, John Morrison, and The Miz in a triple threat for the U.S. belt, which was awesome. And then John Cena versus Wade Barrett. You know, for the whole Nexus storyline. I like the Nexus storyline, how they roped John Cena in there. It's a way to keep him out of the title picture, but still keep him relevant. Randy Orton versus Sheamus was a solid match. And Kane versus Undertaker again. So, okay pay-per-view. Then we've got Bragging Rights, which kind of took the steam off of Survivor Series. So, you got Goldust versus Ted DiBiase. Lay Cool versus Natalya. Or Layla, I should say. Dashing Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre versus John Cena and David Otunga. I like the whole John Cena as part of Nexus thing. Daniel Bryan versus Dolph Ziggler. Great match. Then you got the elimination match. The Miz, Sheamus, CM Punk, John Morrison, R-Truth, Ezekiel Jackson, and Santino Marella. See, random teams there. Versus Big Show, Edge, Rey Mysterio, Kofi Kingston, Jack Swagger, Alberto Del Rio, and Tyler Rex. Jesus. You got Kane versus The Undertaker again in another solid match. And then Randy Orton versus Wade Barrett with John Cena in his corner. See, and that's why that's the only thing that's going on right now at this point in time that's even worth watching is the Nexus storyline with John Cena. Then we have the Survivor Series. Again, the culmination of the Nexus storyline here. You got Lay Cool versus Natalya. You know, it was an okay match. Daniel Bryan versus Ted DiBiase. I like that they were trying to push Ted DiBiase and Daniel Bryan. I loved that. John Morrison and Sheamus, not so good. Dolph Ziggler versus Kaval, which I believe is low-key from TNA, and he didn't do very well in this match. Then you've got the Nexus, Heath Slater and Justin Gabriel versus Santino Marella and Vladimir Kozlov. I like that they had new tag team champions, and it was actually a legit tag team versus randomly put together people. Then you've got Rey Mysterio, Big Show, Kofi Kingston, MVP, and Chris Masters versus Alberto Del Rio, Drew McIntyre, Jack Swagger, Dashing Cody Rhodes, and Tyler Rex. Then you've got Kane versus Edge for the World Heavyweight belt. And then you've got the culmination of the Nexus storyline, Randy Orton versus Wade Barrett with John Cena as the referee. And the whole twist is if John Cena doesn't count Randy Orton down for the 3 and screw him out of the belt, then he will be fired and no longer be able to work in the WWE, which made this whole match very, very interesting. Then you have TLC, more gimmick pay-per-views, not very good either. Natalya and Beth Phoenix versus Lay Cool was pretty solid. Dolph Ziggler, Kofi Kingston, and Jack Swagger for the Intercontinental belt, solid match. John Morrison versus Sheamus, John Cena versus Wade Barrett, amazing match. The Miz and Randy Orton was a very solid match. Then you have Kane, Edge, Rey Mysterio, and Alberto Del Rio, which was not the best match. Then you have the Royal Rumble 2011. This was the first 40-man Royal Rumble. But you had Natalya, Layla, Michelle McCool, and Eve in a fatal 4-way for the Divas title. Not good. Loved the 40-man Royal Rumble match, especially with the return of Diesel. Then you got Edge versus Dolph Ziggler, which was a solid match. And The Miz versus Randy Orton, which was a solid match. So pretty solid Royal Rumble here. Then we've got Elimination Chamber. We got Santino Marella and Vladimir Kozlov versus The Core, Justin Gabriel and Heath Slater. They broke up Nexus into 2 different factions on the 2 different brands, which was dumb. Then you've got The Miz versus Jerry Lawler, which was like, why would Jerry Lawler be in a WWE title match? That was dumb. But Kofi Kingston versus Alberto Del Rio was okay. Then you've got the 2 Elimination Chamber matches, again with a bunch of people. They're trying to push the younger talent. You got Edge, Big Show, Kane, Drew McIntyre, Rey Mysterio, and Wade Barrett, which was a pretty solid match. Then you got John Cena, Randy Orton, John Morrison, R-Truth, CM Punk, and King Sheamus, which was an okay match as well. But again, in this PG era, dark era of WWE, you know, it was kind of tough to watch. Then we have WrestleMania 27, which was probably the worst out of, the bunches here, Pretty thin card. They still did do the Hall of Fame, though, which I liked. But you got Big Show, Kane, Kofi Kingston, and Santino Marella versus The Core. They're just trying to get everyone on the card. Rey Mysterio and Cody Rhodes was actually a very good match. Jerry Lawler versus Michael Cole with Stone Cold as the referee was a dumb storyline and match. The Miz versus John Cena was actually a very solid match. Miz very, very underrated. You got Trish Stratus and Snooki and John Morrison versus Lay Cool and Dolph Ziggler. Horrible. Even with Trish Stratus coming back. Randy Orton and CM Punk was solid. Edge and Alberto Del Rio opened the show, and this was when Edge retired right after this match, I believe. And then you've got Undertaker versus Triple H, which was also kind of overshadowed and not as good as it could have been because of Undertaker's injury, and Triple H had to kind of carry the match, which kind of made this whole pay-per-view hard to watch. The Rock was the host, of course. Then you've got Extreme Rules. Yep, and you got Michelle McCool versus Layla. Loser leaves WWE. That sucks. Jerry Lawler and Jim Ross versus Michael Cole and Jack Swagger. Oh, boy. Rey Mysterio versus Cody Rhodes. That was a pretty solid match. Randy Orton and CM Punk in a last standing match was good. Christian versus Alberto Del Rio. I liked it. I liked that they were finally giving Christian a shot. And then Steel Cage triple threat match, which was a very, very good match. And that's The Miz versus John Cena versus John Morrison. Loved that match. Then we have Over the Limit. Rey Mysterio and R-Truth. Not very good. Big Show and Kane versus CM Punk and Mason Ryan. Not very good. John Cena and The Miz again in another very solid match. Wade Barrett versus Ezekiel Jackson. Wade Barrett wasn't good enough to carry as Ezekiel Jackson. Ezekiel Jackson was horrible. Michael Cole versus Jerry Lawler again. And then you've got Randy Orton versus Christian in their series of phenomenal matches. So pretty solid pay-per-view. Then we have Capital Punishment. John Cena versus R-Truth for the WWE title. Kind of going thin there. Evan Bourne versus Jack Swagger. Not very good. Randy Orton and Christian in match 2 of their classic series. Rey Mysterio and CM Punk. Pretty solid. Wade Barrett and Ezekiel Jackson again. Jesus. Big Show versus Alberto Del Rio. Pretty okay. I loved Alex Riley versus The Miz in that whole storyline. Then you got Kofi Kingston and Dolph Ziggler, which was always solid. Then we've got another Money in the Bank here. Kelly Kelly versus Brie Bella. Kelly Kelly was not very good in the ring. Big Show versus Mark Henry. You know, Mark Henry was coming back and they were trying to get him back into the main event picture. Randy Orton versus Christian, and again, one of their series of phenomenal matches. John Cena versus CM Punk was a great storyline here. And then Rey Mysterio versus Kofi Kingston versus Alex Riley versus Evan Bourne versus Alberto Del Rio versus The Miz versus R-Truth versus Jack Swagger. God, so many people. Then SmackDown, you had Kane, Sin Cara, Daniel Bryan, Wade Barrett, Justin Gabriel, Sheamus, Heath Slater, and Cody Rhodes. I mean, there was only like 2 people legitimately in each of those matches that you actually thought would win. Then you've got one of the better SummerSlam main events in a long time. Loved this whole CM Punk angle here. Thought they played it perfectly. Kelly Kelly versus Beth Phoenix, not very good. Daniel Bryan versus Wade Barrett was a very solid match. Rey Mysterio, John Morrison, and Kofi Kingston versus The Miz, R-Truth, and Alberto Del Rio was dumb. Sheamus and Mark Henry, again, they're trying to elevate Mark Henry. Christian and Randy Orton in another classic match. One more time. One more match. And then the Undisputed Championship match with Triple H as the referee. John Cena versus CM Punk. Classic. Then finally we have Night of Champions. Kelly Kelly and Beth Phoenix again. Air Boom. I did like that they're finally starting to form some legit tag teams here. Versus The Miz and R-Truth. Then you got Cody Rhodes versus Ted DiBiase for the Intercontinental belt. I like that. 2 former tag team partners facing each other for a singles belt. Dolph Ziggler versus Alex Riley versus John Morrison versus Jack Swagger for the US belt. They had a pretty good young undercard here, but they kept trying to push some of them up into the main event picture because of how thin it was up there. Randy Orton versus Mark Henry. Again, trying to bring Mark Henry back into the main event. CM Punk versus Triple H was classic. Love the storyline. And Alberto Del Rio versus John Cena was average. All in all, pretty solid pay-per-view. Again, this was during the dark ages of WWE, in my opinion. But if you like content like this, please like and subscribe. Your support is much appreciated. I'm also on Letterboxd. The link is over in my profile of this page here. Otherwise, until next time, guys.